Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping straight into a really fascinating area of agricultural research.
We are indeed.
And it all hinges on this pretty clever technology called micro X-ray fluorescence, MicroXRF for short.
Right. And basically, it lets scientists see the elemental makeup of things like plants, seeds,
You name it.
yeah, without actually destroying the sample.
Which is key, isn't it? That non-destructive part.
Absolutely. It's like getting a detailed elemental map. Could be a leaf, a seed, even a tiny piece of a tree ring.
And for this deep dive, we're leaning on an article from IXRF Systems. It talks about how their Atlas MicroXRF tool is being used out there in agriculture.
That's right. Lots of different applications.
So our goal today for you listening is to get a handle on how this tech gives us these really valuable insights. We're talking plant-soil interactions, nutrients.
And also things like food safety, environmental management.
Yeah, and even like improving the crops themselves.
It's quite broad.
Definitely. So think of this as your shortcut to understanding this cutting-edge application. We're going to see how looking at something pretty common, like a Brazil nut,
Or something ancient like a tree ring.
exactly, can tell us surprising things about farming and the environment. Okay, let's dig in. First up, Brazil nuts. Maybe in your kitchen right now.
Possibly. Well, what's interesting, or maybe concerning sometimes, about Brazil nuts is how they accumulate certain elements.
Like selenium, I've heard that.
Yeah, selenium's usually there in pretty high amounts, which can be good in moderation, but they can also pick up bromine.
Okay.
And if those bromine levels get too high above the regulatory limits, well, that raises flags.
Right, so the big question was, where's this bromine actually coming from?
Exactly. This is just naturally in the soil taken up by the tree.
Or is this something happening after harvest, like, I don't know, fumigation or some other processing step?
Precisely. And this is where MicroXRF really shines.
Yeah.
Researchers used it to make these incredibly detailed maps inside the nut kernels. They look specifically at where the bromine was, but also zinc, selenium, barium, other elements too.
So when they found high bromine, what were people thinking initially? Did MicroXRF help, rule things out?
Well, yeah, the initial worry was definitely contamination during processing. That's often the first suspect.
Makes sense.
But the MicroXRF maps told a different story. They showed the bromine was spread pretty uniformly throughout the nut tissue.
Ah, so not just on the surface.
Exactly, which strongly suggests it was absorbed from the soil while the nut was growing on the tree. It wasn't just a surface treatment thing.
That's really clear evidence then, almost like an elemental fingerprint.
That's a great way to put it. And you can see how this kind of analysis could be really important for verifying where food comes from, its authenticity.
Yeah, that could impact trade, consumer trust, all sorts.
Definitely.
So for our listeners, this basically means we get a clearer picture of what's naturally in our food.
Right. And helps refine safety standards based on, actual evidence, distinguishing natural accumulation from contamination.
And it helps farmers too, right? Understanding their soil, what their crops are picking up naturally.
For sure. It leads to a more informed way of looking at food safety, from field to table.
Okay, fascinating stuff on the food safety side. Now, let's switch gears slightly. How is this same tech helping us use plants to, well, clean up the environment? We're talking hyperaccumulators.
Yes, hyperaccumulators. This is another really compelling area for MicroXRF.
So what are they exactly, these hyper whatever plants?
Hyperaccumulators. They're basically plants with this amazing kind of superpower ability to suck up and store incredibly high concentrations of certain metals from the soil.
Metals? Like what?
Things like nickel, manganese, zinc, levels far beyond what most plants could tolerate, let alone store.
Wow.
And MicroXRF is proving super useful in finding and studying these botanical wonders. There was a big study in Papua New Guinea.
Oh, yeah.
They used MicroXRF to screen over 3,000 plant samples.
3,000? That's massive.
It really is. And it paid off. They identified several new hyperaccumulator species.
Including one called Grevillea papuana.
That's the one. It's remarkable for accumulating zinc. Just astonishing levels.
And the research showed maps of this, right? Like where the zinc actually is in the plant.
Yes, exactly. You can see these MicroXRF maps showing the distribution of calcium, iron, and then this really concentrated zinc in specific tissues. It visually confirms it.
So, okay, the obvious use is cleanup, right? Using these plants to pull metals out of contaminated soil, phytoremediation.
That's the primary application people think of, yes. Phytoremediation.
But what else can we learn from them? Does their ability to handle all that metal tell us something unique about plant biology? Could we maybe use that knowledge somehow?
That's a really important question. Because while cleanup is great, understanding the mechanisms how these plants tolerate and store so much metal is scientifically fascinating.
Right.
It could lead to breakthroughs in other areas, maybe even biomining.
Biomining. You mean using plants to extract metals?
Potentially, yeah. Growing specific plants on low-grade ore bodies to extract valuable metals in a maybe more sustainable way. It's an idea being explored.
Huh. Interesting. And it's not just zinc, right? The article mentioned other
Oh,
metals.
yeah. There's research on nickel hyperaccumulation, particularly in places like New Caledonia, and also arsenic.
Arsenic. Wow.
Yes, understanding how certain plants, especially some ferns, can take up and even transform arsenic. There are studies cited on species like Pterogramma calamalanos and Pitas vittata.
And the maps show this arsenic uptake.
They do. You can see maps showing potassium, arsenic, and calcium distribution, and how it might differ between younger and older parts of the plant, showing that accumulation over time.
So for the listener, this is bigger than just cleanup. It's fundamental plant science, potentially new green technologies for resources.
Exactly. It shows how this micro-level elemental view can open up really significant environmental and maybe even economic avenues.
Amazing. Okay, so we've gone from nuts to whole plants cleaning up soil. Let's zoom in even further, right down to the seed level.
Right. Seeds are obviously crucial. They hold all the nutrients the next generation plant needs to get started.
And understanding where those nutrients are inside the seed is important.
Vitally important, especially if we want to improve crop quality and, ultimately, human nutrition.
And MicroXRF helps here because it can analyze lots of seeds quickly.
Yes, that's the high throughput aspect.
Huh.
It allows researchers to look at thousands of seeds relatively rapidly and, again, non-destructively. You don't have to grind them up.
Okay, and there was an example with rice seeds.
That's right. A study used MicroXRF to map out where key elements were located within the rice grain.
Things like,
Manganese, iron, copper, zinc, essential micronutrients. They looked at their distribution in different parts, like the embryo.
the baby plant bit,
Yeah, and the endosperm.
the food supply.
Exactly. There are even images showing concentrations in the whole seed versus a cross-section. Really detailed stuff.
So what did mapping this reveal? How does it help improve nutrition?
Well, by seeing exactly where these nutrients end up, researchers could start linking that distribution pattern to specific genetic traits in the rice.
Connecting genes to nutrient placement.
Precisely. Which is fundamental for developing what we call biofortified crops.
Crops bred to be more nutritious.
Exactly. Breeding crops to naturally have higher levels of essential vitamins and minerals in the parts we actually eat. It's seen as a really sustainable way to tackle malnutrition, especially for populations relying heavily on staple foods like rice.
And because MicroXRF is non-destructive and fast, it's practical for those big breeding programs.
Hugely practical. It's a powerful tool for them.
So for listeners, this tech we're discussing is directly helping efforts to make our food healthier, potentially impacting millions. It's not just about growing more food, but growing better food.
That's the goal. Quality over just quantity.
Okay, building on that nutrient distribution, let's think about how plants get nutrients in the first place, from the soil, from fertilizers. How does MicroXRF help optimize that?
Right. So we know plants need a whole range of nutrients, a balanced diet, if you will. But getting that balance right, especially with fertilizers, can be tricky. Too much, too little.
Yeah.
MicroXRF allows scientists to map how nutrients, whether from the soil or added fertilizer, are actually absorbed and then where they go inside the plant.
So not just measuring the total amount in the plant later, but seeing the journey, seeing if the nutrients get to, say, the leaves for photosynthesis or the roots or the grain itself.
Exactly that. You get spatial information. Are the applied nutrients reaching the critical tissues where they're needed most?
How does that kind of detail help farmers be more, I guess, efficient and maybe sustainable?
Well, it's incredibly valuable for fine-tuning fertilizer strategies.
Okay.
If you can see precisely where nutrients are going, or where there's a bottleneck or a deficiency blocking growth, farmers can adjust what they apply, when they apply it, maybe how they apply it.
More targeted.
Much more targeted. It helps ensure the plant gets what it needs, right where it needs it, but it also helps avoid over-fertilization.
Which saves money.
Saves money, absolutely. And crucially, it reduces the environmental impact. Less excess fertilizer running off into rivers or degrading the soil.
So it's smarter farming, really.
Yeah.
Good for the crop, good for the farmer's wallet, and better for the environment.
That's the idea.
Right.
Moving beyond a kind of scattergun approach to a much more precise, informed system.
Okay, great. So we've covered food safety, plant cleanup, seed nutrition, fertilizer use, all quite micro level. Now, let's zoom way out. Tree rings. How does MicroXRF tell us about the past environment?
Ah, tree rings. They're amazing natural archives, aren't they?
They really are. Each ring is like a year in the tree's life.
And they record the conditions of that year. Climate, yes, but also clues about the soil chemistry at the time.
And MicroXRF can read those clues.
It can. Just like with the nuts or seeds, it can analyze the elemental composition within each annual growth ring.
So you can track changes in elements year by year, going back decades, even centuries.
Or millennia, in some cases. By looking at the sequence of rings and their elemental makeup, scientists can reconstruct a timeline of environmental changes the tree lived through.
The article had a really striking example of this, didn't it, from the Mediterranean?
Yes, a study on ancient Mediterranean trees. Using MicroXRF, they found this really noticeable sharp drop in calcium levels in the rings.
A drop in calcium. When?
It dated to around 1562 to 1558 BC.
Okay, that's specific. Does that date ring any bells historically?
It does indeed. It lines up remarkably well with the estimated time of the massive volcanic eruption of Thera, modern-day Santorini.
Wow, so a huge volcanic eruption thousands of years ago likely caused this calcium dip in trees hundreds of miles away.
That's the strong hypothesis. Perhaps acid rain from the eruption leached calcium from the soil, or volcanic ash altered soil chemistry. Whatever the mechanism, the trees recorded it. The data even includes a scan showing this calcium depletion clearly in a juniper wood sample.
That is incredible, a chemical signature of a volcanic catastrophe preserved in wood, readable today thanks to this tech.
It really highlights the power of tree rings, combined with MicroXRF as historical environmental monitors.
And for us today, what's the relevance? Why does knowing about past events like that matter for agriculture now?
Well, understanding how ecosystems, including agricultural lands, responded to major environmental shifts in the past gives us vital clues for building resilience today.
Right. Especially with challenges like climate change, soil degradation.
Exactly. Knowing how past disruptions played out helps us develop better strategies to anticipate and cope with future environmental changes and their potential impact on food production. It gives us that long-term perspective.
Absolutely. It connects the deep past to our future challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so wrapping things up then. It seems pretty clear that MicroXRF is, well, a seriously versatile tool for agricultural research.
It really is. That ability to do non-destructive elemental analysis opens so many doors.
Yeah, we've seen insights into food safety with the Brazil nuts, environmental cleanup with hyperaccumulators,
Improving crop nutrition through seed analysis, optimizing fertilizer use.
and even reading environmental history in tree rings. It touches on so many different aspects.
Ultimately, it's giving us a much deeper, more detailed understanding of those really complex interactions between plants, the soil, and the nutrients they need. A level of detail that just wasn't possible with older methods that required destroying the sample.
It feels like we're just scratching the surface sometimes, which brings me to a final thought for our listeners.
Okay.
Thinking about the future. Where else could this kind of high-resolution elemental mapping take us? Especially as we face big challenges like global food security, environmental sustainability, and a world that's constantly changing.
That's a good question.
What other unexpected insights might pop up as this tech gets applied more widely? Could this micro-level view of elements genuinely revolutionize how we approach farming and environmental science? Something to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. The potential seems vast.
Indeed. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive today.
My pleasure.